Hello, friends. This is going to be my quick summary, I guess. I've prepared slides, so it might be a lot less uh, rambly than it usually will be. So this is going to be my Brume summary. I've been testing her for about 3 days. The initial testing um, from most CM players was that she was undercooked in a lot of ways. Um, she was designed as a Corvus sub DPS, right? She's a mental based character that improves um, ult damage, which Corvus's follow up attacks scale off of. Um, and that buff only applies to mental damage. But as a result, what came out when her numbers released was that they aren't as significant off the bat, right? Even even before that, we thought that well, at least I thought that with portrait scaling, she could improve, but that's not necessarily the case. So we're going to talk about Broom. We're going to summarize her real quick so that people who just want the footnotes and how Broom relates to their situation in patch 3.0 can take away that message and adjust their pull plan accordingly. But I've prepared some slides so I don't ramble as much. But I'm gonna look at her. I'm gonna give you my sort of like takeaway from all her different compositions that she can be played in, as well as maybe if we have time, we'll showcase some gameplay as well. Do like 450 meters dash 3 or something. Okay. So this is gonna be the opening summary for you guys that just want the footnotes, right? Broom is a character with three different comps available at the moment. So she can be played with Corvus as a support character, and she can be played by herself as a main DPS. She is a beast afflatus, right? So take that into account. If you don't have a lot of beast units, she is currently the best beast unit in the game. And she can finally be played with Anjo, which is a sort of a somewhat controversial topic, which I'll get into. Her stability when played with her defined teams is what is her current biggest problem, right? So she has issues with playing within the Corvus team comp, right? You might have seen footage from the demo, right? And the demo has a huge problem, right? It doesn't represent the actual character. Not only that, but it's also playing with two characters that fundamentally change when they're played with portraits, right? So, for instance, Corvus P2 makes her ult hit twice or 3 times rather, and that changes things considerably. Brume P2 changes her entire like rotation, which I'll get into later. Karen P2 makes his initial start have one additional Moxie, right? So he starts with 3 Moxie, and then you add the afflatus bonus of a character like Corvus and stuff, as well as his starting consternation stacks and shockwave. So it makes an incredibly different picture to how Broom will play out of the box. Okay, so disregard any of the demo footage that you might have seen, right? So in a bubble, she is a short-term specialist who wants to chain her ult and follow-up attack, and I'll get into that when I briefly touch on her skills. When played as a main DPS, she boasts currently the top 3 highest damage per round at P0. This is an important part. At P0, right? With portrait scaling, characters tend to be in completely different positions. And this is also not factoring in, obviously, like their utility or their defensives and such, right? In the meta, considering neutral afflatus, right? And this one pertains to Anjanala here, this last statement. If there are no bug fixes and changes, I would skip Corvus in 3.0. Say that you're short on pulls, right? You need a pull for a whole host of characters. Where by the time 3.2 rolls around, I would skip Corvus at this moment. I love Corvus. I have Corvus on 2 different accounts. I want to play Corvus all day, but that it is what it is currently. With the addition of Brume, hold on. With the addition of Brume, Karen becomes T0. So Karen's status in the meta, if he wasn't already T0 on your rankings, I think in the community tier list, he's like 9.3 or something, right? He should be T0. He should be within the top 4 characters. If T0 was an echelon upon itself, where only the most sought after characters are in it, then Flutter Page for Tutu, Nordica, Kiparina, and Karen would join that crew as well. And the last thing for you guys that just want the footnotes is that Karen is a must pull if you want to play Dynamo. Karen is the most important character to be pulling in 3.0. So make sure you get Karen if you have any intention of playing either a Corvus Dynamo, a Lucy Dynamo, or Brume Dynamo. Okay. All right. So here we go. Things to know. So this is going to be, I'll try to be as quick as possible because a lot of you just don't even want to hear this stuff. It's too complex. The reason why I'm not initially starting out with gameplay is because it's confusing, right? There's so much stuff under the hood that you need to take it into account with Brume that it's confusing. So the most important thing is she operates on a resource called thermoelectric effect. I don't know if that's the correct terminology for it, but we'll shorten it and call it electricity, right? So she can transfer, as a Dynamo character, she transfers 15 Dynamo per round. At the end of the round, she gains 5 Dynamo. Her ult bypasses the card limit. So when you get an ult, it doesn't restrict your card draw or the amount of your normal cards in your deck to like 7, for instance, right? Or 8. So start of the round, gain 5 electricity, right? Again, this is her core resource, which I'll get into later. When 20 Dynamo is infused by either herself or her allies, she gains 5 electricity. And when she does a follow-up attack, she does a burn, right? And at 3 stacks of burn, she gains 2 electricity. Okay, and this is her special Dynamo trait, right? Entering Dynamo level 3, immediately gain 20 stacks of electricity and extend the duration of crystal piezo electricity by 1 round. So I'll get into what that skill is here in a second. Another thing is every time Brume gains 15 stacks of electricity, she gains herself 5 stacks of Dynamo. So this is the only way that she's generating. It's the only way that she's generating Dynamo for herself, as well as, more importantly, 1 Moxie. This is the core of what makes her kit work, right? She is a every turn ult kind of character. That's what she wants to achieve. That's sort of her win condition. Start of the battle, she gains this crystal piezo electricity for 3 rounds. So you don't have to worry about it, but after 3 rounds or after 4 rounds, you have to consider reapplying it. During a single S1B, so her S1 is a adaptive skill, meaning that it has 2 different properties. So you can choose between an attack or a channeling skill, right? So during that, if you choose the channeling and you consume at least 40 stacks of electricity, her follow-up attacks become different, okay? We'll talk about that in a second. For every 10 stacks exceeding the 40 requirement, the follow-up attack gains additional damage, which is capped at 400% at P0, which equates to 60 stacks. Now, the 60 stack number is very important, and we'll be talking about it further. But to note, you see that it's 60 stacks to achieve the max damage, right? And if you divide 60 by 15, which is how she gains 1 Moxie, she gains 4 Moxie if she has 60 stacks. So I hope I'm not being too fast. I just don't want the video to take like 30 minutes. It's just too tiring for everyone involved, right? So this is her S1, and this is the choice A, right? This is an attack. Low power attack that gains crystal P for 3 turns, right? So you start out with this buff, so you don't have to worry about it until the the 5th turn, basically. There's a way that it gets extended when she ults, when she goes into level 3 Dynamo, sorry. So what this does, it affects her follow-up attack, channeling state, and it grants these huge bonuses, right? And it also makes her follow-up attack apply burn, right? And when that follow-up attack, it becomes more empowered and applies more burn. Right? I think we talked about how burn has a cap of 30, but every 3 burn, she gains more of this electricity, right? And this skill is one of the reasons why she is draw hungry, right? Because if you're using a shuffling card, right? Or the first melody shuffler, right? What ends up happening is you get 8 cards on the deck to start with, and then you have to keep using her skills, but there comes a point where unless you're lucky through RNG, you can't pick both this card to refresh this buff as well as the damage. So what ends up happening is you have to refresh this buff, wait a turn, and then be able to do your burst. So that's one of the reasons why she is draw hungry. This card is very much in demand because you want to play it every time. Not this particular variation, but this variation. So this is her channeling, right? This is how she does her damage. It's a channeling state that makes her do a follow-up attack, grants her 10 stacks of electricity, and enters the channeling state gem charging for 1 round. During this, okay, this is, I already touched on this, and obviously you know that she needs Moxie, or she gets Moxie the more electricity she has. And so this is how the skill itself gets amplified, right? When you're doing a channeling with only 10 electricity, it will do 700%, and then it becomes incredibly amped by the time you are doing your max 60 electricity attack under level 3. It's a potency of 3,900%, which is absurd, and which is what is making her one of the strongest characters in the game. So, and then on top of that, this is what fuels this value here. Okay. What else did I write? She effectively generates 15 stacks on her own turn. She relies on the team to generate the other 25 dynamo via infusing. So this is how her dynamo generation is kind of gated in a sense, right? She has a max of 15, which is the same as Ulrich, right? But if she's not played with multiple, if she's not played with like 3 dynamo characters, then obviously it could pose a problem for you getting into level 3. Like that might be extended an extra round, which we'll talk about here in a sec. So this is her S2. This is what I was suspecting that would make her an amazing character, but the values, the numbers aren't great, which is why she is lacking in this sort of like support role department. Okay, so this is also why she isn't played with Lucy, but I'll get into that. Grants 10 stacks of electricity, and then grants all allies a buff called Truth Tempering, which is both an application debuff that they get, as well as a flat damage buff as well. So the flat damage buff is that for non-mental characters, they get 20% damage dealt and 10% incantation might, which is absolutely nothing, right? Anybody that is released in the last, including 5 stars that is released in the last year, can perform a buff of this magnitude. But what is special to Brume is that if she's played with a mental based character, the total amount of the buff becomes 20% damage, 20% incantation might, and crucially 40% ultimate might, which is an extra modifier in the damage formula, which is also something that she utilizes in her follow-up attack, which is what leads to the crazy multipliers here. Okay, so we don't really need to worry too much about explaining the debuffs. It is a debuff that is stackable, but it's additive to a lot of existing debuffs, which is why it's not that great. Her ult is a single target attack that deals 750% mental damage. It grants her 10 stacks of electricity. So when she spams her ult, she's also generating more of her resource to hit that 60 mark for her channeling state, right? So that she can do her max burst. It extends the duration of her buff. So in a sense, it theoretically makes her a AP efficient character, but in reality, that's not the case because she wants to be spamming all those cards anyway to generate the 60 TE or electricity. After she ults, another core element of this attack is that she applies Fair Dodger to the target, which essentially makes her a single target main DPS, right? Otherwise, her follow-up attacks go everywhere. They're not focused, so it can hit anything on the field if there are a lot of mobs. So it's akin to Voyage's ult for the impromptu team. What this does in reality is it guarantees that burn stacks accumulate rapidly on a single target and then triggering other burn related electricity gains until the 30 cap, right? So because she applies 10 stacks of burn, it's currently the highest source of burn that she can instantly generate through one skill, right? But because she ults so frequently, it becomes capped if it's a single target fight. So my miscellaneous testing and thoughts about Brume is that, starting with, because her S1B, her channeling, generates burn, she gains 2 more electricity, which results in 5 more moxie. This is just a little quirk that I figured out where you don't necessarily have to generate 15 thermoelectricity. You just need to go beyond 10 in order to generate the 5 dynamo. She's an extremely dynamo reliant, ally reliant character. She 100% requires Karen to even function. She generates only 15 dynamo. So by round 3, if she were to just operate by herself, she would hit 45 dynamo, which obviously means that she can't hit that 50 dynamo into level 2. She can't dump dynamo like Lucy and Corvus, who can both dump like anywhere between 30 to like a little over 30 with Lucy, I believe, which is what makes her useless in any other comp. The 222 variant or 2-2 variant is only possible with Charon. By that, I mean, if you're using a character like Flutterpage and a support like Fatutu, then that's only viable because with Charon. She's extremely draw hungry in all viable comps. A lot of the cards need to just be funneled into her. Yet if using shuffle, you can't. Yeah, I talked about this initially, where you can't use 2 S1 skills because you simply won't be drawing 2 S1 skills at the rate at which you're going to be using S1, right? The buff card is largely uninteresting, used only for electricity and moving moxie. Yeah, this is a gameplay design problem. It's just a boring skill to use. It's a weak buff for everyone other than mental damage characters, but that aside, the buff implementation makes her feel kind of boring to play in some respects, right? Yeah, the last part I already covered. Burn application and electricity generation feels shoehorned in. Like this value here with like 3 burn generating 2 electricity, it just feels awful to calculate, right? If you're trying to like calculate on the fly, like, okay, I'm going to get this exact amount of electricity so I can hit that 60 mark to do my full burst. It's very, very hard to calculate, especially with how slow the game updates at certain periods of the fight. Just a flat electricity gain that's easy to read, like a number like 5 or 10, right, would have been much better. Which alludes to maybe another character might be interacting with it, a Euphoria character that interacts with her special type of burn, or a healer interaction, the Dynamo healer interaction, right? When she's played with Lucy's reality-based Dynamo team, it's a 60% damage loss, obviously, because you're replacing either Ulrich or Karen. If you replace Karen, yeah, that's it for you. And so, moving on. Burn caps at 30, so multi-target fights where AoE follow-up attacks applies 5 to multiple mobs, because when you do the AoE, it applies not 3 burn, but it applies 5 burn. Is a huge boost to her electricity generation, which makes her very good to play as P0 in mains, especially mains fights where there's multiple mobs that are constantly respawning, right? Okay, and then it conversely becomes an issue during single target fights when you're ulting to keep the cycle going, but then you hit the burn cap of 30 stacks, whereupon you don't generate that additional electricity, which might hinder your ability to hit that 60 mark for your next ult, right? Okay, so currently, this is another big takeaway. Currently, P0 Brume is being outperformed, is outperforming a P5 Lucy in raw damage. P5 Lucy offers a stability in a fixed rotation over longer fights, but in Afflatus neutral fights, Brume comes out ahead significantly at P0, by the way. So those of you, including myself, I pulled 3 copies of Lucy, but those of you who pulled 6 copies, maybe in the more recent rerun, I am very sorry to say that, but it is the reality. Brume has the highest targeted burst in the game at the moment. She can be used to slam damage. So because her burst is controllable, right? You don't necessarily have to spend her stuff, her electricity. You don't need to burn it every cycle, right? If there's a particular mechanic that you need to overcome, like a mitigation window, then you can burst at the interval that you want to be bursting at. Excuse me, still sick. Might take a swig of water. Okay. I'm so sorry. So moving on with Corvus. Now this is her biggest issue. Okay. Currently, it's hard to recommend as a Corvus support, even with the 40% ult might. Corvus's win condition interacts so poorly. So Corvus wants to get to 60 stacks of her stitching, or whatever the buff is called, every time she comes out, by the time she comes out of a level 3 Dynamo cycle, right? That is her win condition. She wants to build these stacks up to a high number, so the multipliers become insane. So that's why she is the quote unquote perfect mains character. But because of how RNG reliant the initial card draw is when played with Unfinished Melody, and how draw hungry Brume is, right? Brume's win condition is to be ulting turn after turn after turn in order to generate the resources, to do the damage, to keep her buff refreshed. There's a multitude of reasons why she needs to do that, but because Corvus is also very card hungry, as well as draw specific, right? You want to be drawing her debuff card as much as you can while keeping her channeling buff active. That's why Brume is doesn't feel that great to be played with Corvus. I'm not gonna lie, which we'll get into. Cannot use unfinished disc if you want to play Corvus with consecutive ults at P0. That's just the reality of the P0 currently, and I'll explain that here in a second. So the character demo was everybody was P2. Obviously, that makes things flow smoothly, feel fun. Everybody has enough card draw and AP to be utilizing their cards and keeping their buffs up. That's great. But in reality, that is not the case. So like I recently just pulled for P2 on my main account, which took like 300 and something, 310 pulls or something. Ridiculous, right? So it's not fun to be chasing portraits, especially if you're unlucky on the 50-50s. So when her optimal play is, when played with Corvus, is restricted to portraits as of 3.2 within the 3.2 character structure, that I cannot really recommend that. So this stuff you can read and figure out. I'm just trying to hustle as much as possible, right? I would love to show gameplay footage with at least Anjo. Trial fight is therefore extremely misleading, and currently the comp feels so uncomfortable, but this is alluding to the high likelihood of a spirit-based or intelligence-based dynamo healer, likely spirit, right? 2 spirit, 2 intelligence would be a nice little play, right? So this new dynamo healer that I'm theoretically proposing would allow for the P0 Chiron to have a one card usage start, right? In its current state, in this current comp, not this current comp, but with with this current comp, I believe with Brume as well as a healer that isn't Afflatus positive with them, he needs to use 2 cards, right? Yeah. And it also solves the issue of the 2-2 team as well, which would mean that what happens in the 2-2 team right now is that Chiron needs to move a card and then use 2 cards. So he takes up 3 action points in the beginning of the round in order to get into his channeling state by round 2, right? As a P0 Chiron. So currently Brume is iffy when it comes to generating dynamo injection, right? Because a lot of it is she relies on doing the follow-up attacks to apply the burn, which causes a problem in its stability when you near the burn cap. Okay, so what is the actual problem, right? So Brume's win condition is that she wants to ult back-to-back, at least even during the first level 3 dynamo. Like, that's what she wants to do, right? But regardless of whether there's enough card draw or AP left on the table for her to even do that, the current problem is that she needs to ult and use her channel card. That's how she does her damage, right? And she wants to get 60 electricity, right? That's how she does her max damage. That's also how she generates 4 Moxie, so she can ult the next cycle. So the breakdown is that when she uses her channeling card, she generates 10 electricity, she generates 10 off of her ult, she generates a whole bunch of burn here. I did the calculation, and she generates 16 burn, 16 electricity, and then they do their attacks and transfer dynamo, which generates electricity, which results in a cap of 15 electricity, right? And in the current team comp, that is. And Brume at the start of the round also generates 5. So in total, she generates 56 at P0, which means it's only 4 Moxie, which means she only gets 4 AP, where she's one AP short. Let me just turn off that alarm. Hold on. Oh my god, everything that could go wrong. Okay, I'm sorry about that. So Broom P1 solves this, right? Broom's P1 solves this by adding an extra 5 electricity generation to her S1 card. So although this is possible to do, it's only possible through card merging, right? When you get a level 2 card is when this rotation is possible, but the likelihood of that happening very slim. You have to do a lot of resetting. So, moving on. She is the best Corvus support, but only at P1, and even then, over long fights, Flutter Page outscales Brume, right? At the same time, any team that doesn't require Flutter Page is good because she is required everywhere. Flutter Page is another tier 0 support. She's sought after by so many other teams because every team uses follow-up attack to some variation. So there you go. So that essentially elevates Brume in a silly way, right? In an 8-round fight, the current best way to utilize Corvus with a Brume support is for the Brume to only be playing the buff card, right? She doesn't interact with her ult at all. She only generates until Corvus goes into a position during the last round of the 8th round where she can't double ult due to other buffing and scaling concerns would increase the damage output a lot more. That's when Brume can use her follow-up attack. This is the tested theoretical, like not theoretical, but tested highest damage output that can be achieved when playing Brume with Corvus. It's still great, but you know, when the intended mechanic is to have at least some kind of interaction with your ult card, right? Or even your other cards, like your channeling card, and that's not being utilized, it just feels like, why even, what is this character, right? So that is currently why Brume feels the design and the philosophy, there was a clash in something there, and it just doesn't feel good to play, right? So, moving on, this is her best team with Anjo. It is currently using a bugged, or at the very least, undetermined at the time, whether it is intended or not. So what's happening is that when Anjo does her ult card, right? Everybody goes to sleep, and there are a list of characters that can trigger a follow-up attack while this is happening, and then there are a list of characters that can't trigger a follow-up attack. Brume just so happens to be able to do her entire round of this follow-up attack before she enters the sleep stage, right? And the reason why I suspect that that's happening is because Brume's follow-up attacks defer when she has different values of electricity, right? So the game's checking for the electricity value to determine which follow-up attack is being utilized, and that's causing her follow-up attack to trigger before the sleep actually comes into play, right? So these are the changes with Anjonala's Euphoria. The key takeaway here is that because Brume is a beast character, right? She gains ultimate might 6%. Another way that her follow-up attack is scaling is through this passive, right? It can stack up to 8 times. What is that? 48. And then on top of that, this new skill, that Legato Harmony that Anjo got, also provides her Interwoven Dream, which is her ult, to be to not consume a AP and to not take up the draw limit as well. And she also gains 2 Moxie. So what ends up happening is that there's a perpetual cycle of Anjanala being able to ult back to back to back, and which is fueled by the fact that Brume is generating 4 Moxie every round, and the list goes on, right? So what this creates is the most stable team, right? Whenever Anjanala ults, she has a debuff thing called like collection of debuffs, I believe is what it's called. So there's a range of debuffs that she can apply when she ults. I think it's like two debuffs from that pool that have separate timers independent of each other. And so because she's ulting so consecutively, it creates this this amazing debuff dumping situation where the mob that you're fighting really can't do anything, right? Add to that, she has her charm ability, right? Her S1 and her S2 apply the titillated or whatever it's called charm ability, and that gives her an additional out in terms of being safe, being able to CC, being able to debuff. It's incredible, right? It's kind of absurd at in this current state. It allows everyone on the team to have 0 AP. So what I mean by this is Kiran and the healer are going to have a simplified ritual, which means every time they enter level 3, they're going to have free ults, right? And once Anjanala gets 8 Legato, her ult is free. Brume never casts her ult, obviously. When Anjanala's ult goes off, Brume's ult goes off before that, and that's why everybody's ult is essentially free. It allows for Kiran's shockwave to stack up to absurd amounts, right? He can, theoretically, I think it's possible for him to like just be channeling with the amount of Moxie overflow that's being accumulated. Because what happens is Anjanala is at capped Moxie, right? But Brume needs to be playing her cards in order to generate the thermoelectricity, right? And because of that, because of the 3 cards that we're funneling into Moxie overflow, it's creating this huge surplus of shockwave created for Kiran, right? So he doesn't necessarily have to refresh his ult as much, but it's still okay to do because you want to clear the deck of cards in order to get more Anjanala and Brume cards. So this comp can also be played with the 2 different tuning abilities, right? First melody is the shuffling thing. Unfinished tune is the one where you discard and then you can draw. The initial cycle requires a 3-turn ramp to go into. So because Dynamo is 30, Dynamo is 90, right? In order to get into level 3. And Kiran can only generate 20 or transfer 20, and Brume can only transfer 15. They can only do 35, 35, 35, which, you know, creates that issue of the going back into level 3 being 3 turns long, but it makes up for it with the attacks that's going out with Anjanala and stuff. Okay. What else is there? Excuse me. So moving on to portraits, I will quickly touch on this. Let me see what the time is. Oh my god, it's 39 minutes. Okay, portraits. Why? I feel like I was talking very fast, by the way. Portraits, T0 character, T0.5 character, right? At P0. The biggest tragedy of this character is that she lacks any replaceable qualities to make a T0, right? When we go back to who we talked about, Flutter Page, Fatutu, Nordica, and Kiran, they have their own special irreplaceable qualities. What Brume is bringing to the table is purely damage at the moment. And we see from Brume an inflation in the not a clear inflation in the development direction in terms of where the damage inflation is going, especially because they changed mains bulletin in 3.2, right? So, quick summary of the portraits. P1 adds stability in getting these 60 electricity amount, right? It's subject to change, right, with the dynamo healer. If there's an additional person transferring dynamo, then this won't be as strict of a requirement, because the dynamo overflow will add to more thermo or electricity generation. P2 is not needed unless you're playing suboptimally. It basically adds electricity onto your buff card, making the buff card generate 15 instead of 10, which is pointless. It just results in excess electricity, which can be utilized by her P1, but it's not. So there's more stuff, more adage to P1 that I haven't listed here, but I have P1, but I haven't used it yet. So follow attack damage increase at P3, it's significant. It goes from 600%. So the AoE big burst thing, right? It now scales up to 800% instead of 600. The cap in the damage was 400%, right? At P0, it's now 800. That's a significant increase. P4 makes her the strongest character in the game. We haven't done a portrait by portrait comparison, obviously, but this solidifies her position in the game. It's an absurd portrait. So essentially, her AoE variations or follow-up attack variations go from 600% to 1,200%, which is, I mean, like this. Think about this being doubled, right? This being doubled, crazy, absurd. It doesn't make any sense. Alt might scaling on top. Okay, so that value, not only double it, but double and then 1.25 it, right? Alt might scaling becomes additionally increased. The further, yeah, you're gonna have to double it and then make further adjustments. And the max scaling goes up to 1000%, up from 800 from P3, I believe. P5, it's the funniest P5 to date, because given how strong P4 is, I guess they had to tone it down and kind of shoehorn in something, right? P5 gives additional 10% buff and 10% ult damage. It's kind of meaningless at that point. So, my closing thoughts. What do you need as a 3.0 player need to consider? If you don't have Lucy, right, look forward to an exceptional stand-in for Lucy, right? She's going to replace... she's going to be the strongest Dynamo character if that bugged interaction with... Well, I say bugged, but I don't want to, like, trigger people, right? If that current interaction with Anjo is left intact. If you don't have Lucy... Karan, and looking at Corvus, pick one of Corvus or Brume. I would, if you have the luxury of picking both, then I would obviously lean towards picking both. I would not prioritize portraits ever. But with that said, Brume would be my choice. And then Corvus scaling is the best in the game, long-term fight specialist. But her con is also that she's the long-term long fight specialist. Very few content is within her niche, right? Very few content goes beyond 15 rounds. So, there you go. Brume functions as both a high single target and decent AoE at P0 as the main DPS. Brume is also the best Beast of Flatus character in the game. 100% playable with Corvus at P0, but still hard to recommend because of how clunky it feels, right? Obviously, that's going to be smoothed out if there's ever a Dynamo healer. Now, the final thing is this is the chat that's been floating around, right? We don't know what the source is. It looks like it was made by IceFox, but it wasn't. Or not IceFox. Icehood, but it wasn't. But basically this is the damage rankings in the game. Don't use this as verbatim, but it does highlight a lot of interesting stuff, right? So you can see the numbers. You can see how. So the W means 10,000. So she's doing 1.6 mil per round. Okay, we can accept that with the conditional that it is it's a neutral afflatus environment, and it also includes Genesis damage. It uses the best side cubes of these characters at max, as well as Resonance 10. 0 portraits based on, and it's a 4-person team. The enemy stats are 1,000 defense and 25 crit defense and 20% damage reduction, right? And what's important are actually these notes, right? Leads by a landslide. The damage distribution is something to take into account here. So, I hope that was informative. Yeah, the video is way too long, 46 minutes. I pulled on Anjanala, got her Euphoria. She is the Euphoria banner character that you can test with in Reveries, but I pulled her because I want to at least be able to showcase this later on in the future. I also have P1 that I can showcase in the future and how that changes her rotation if there isn't a Dynamo healer in 3.3. But hopefully that helped in some way. I hope some of you are paid attention and are able to glean some information off of this. I think if you're currently playing on CN, then this will be actually very helpful in making a decision on whether to pull. Anjanala's banner has, unfortunately, it's not available anymore, but Brume is still there. I wouldn't necessarily chase her portraits, but her P1 does provide a very high quality of life. If you're looking to get into P4 on a standard banner character on their debut, that is a tall order, right? That's you got to be a 50-50 gambling maniac to be able to do that, but you know, good luck to you. So that's it for me. Till next time.